What if I told you that the bloodiest war in American history was lost not on the battlefield, but at the printing press? Right now, in your wallet, you have dollars that function exactly like the currency that destroyed an entire nation in 1865. And here's what should scare you: the Federal Reserve is doing exactly what the Confederacy did before its collapse. Imagine the following scene: April 1865. Confederate soldiers are starving, not because there is no food, but because their money is worthless. A pair of shoes cost $600. A barrel of flour, $1,000. These weren't lazy soldiers or bad fighters. These were Americans who were literally printed into poverty by their government. And the dirty little secret is that our government learned a lesson from this disaster, but not the lesson you think. As you read this, the Federal Reserve has printed more money in the last 4 years than the Confederacy printed during the entire Civil War. Think I'm exaggerating? Wait until you hear the numbers. The South printed $1.7 billion in Confederate money between 1861 and 1865, and the Fed, since 2020, it has created $5 trillion. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Confederate Secretary of the Treasury Christopher Memminger knew exactly what would happen when he started printing money. He had the reports. He saw what happened to France during the Revolution. He watched as inflation destroyed entire economies. But he did it anyway. Why? Because there was a secret deal with European bankers that historians don't want you to know about. You won't believe it, but the same banking families that financed the Confederacy's money printing are the ancestors of today's Federal Reserve Board members. February 1861. While Americans were choosing sides in the coming war, a group of bankers secretly gathered in Montgomery, Alabama. They did not gather to discuss battle strategies or supply lines. They gathered to create the most dangerous weapon in American history: paper money backed only by promises. The Confederacy had a huge problem. They had cotton, land, and millions of supporters, but almost no gold. The entire Confederate treasury contained less than $1 million in hard currency. And the Union? They had banks, gold reserves, and Wall Street. So the South made a deal with the devil. They printed their way to victory. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Secretary Memminger stood before the Confederate Congress and said something that will give you goosebumps. "Gentlemen, we will finance this war not with gold, but with the faith of our people." Sound familiar? That's exactly what the Federal Reserve says about the dollar today. Full faith and credit. Same words, same lie. In 6 months, the Confederacy printed $100 million. No gold backing, no silver, just paper and promises. Confederate soldiers were paid with these gray bills, as they were called. At first, people accepted them. Stores accepted them. Farmers sold their produce for them. But wait until you hear what happened in 1862. The Union discovered the South's weakness. Not their army, not their supplies, their money. Union spies began flooding the South with counterfeit Confederate dollars. Yes, you heard that right. The U.S. government conducted a massive counterfeiting operation. They printed billions of counterfeit Confederate money and smuggled it into the South. And this is where the story gets really sinister. By 1863, no one could tell real Confederate money from counterfeit money. Store owners began refusing to accept all Confederate currency. Soldiers had not been paid with real money for several months. Their families were starving, while warehouses were filled with food that no one wanted to sell for worthless pieces of paper. One Confederate soldier wrote in his diary, "I have $300 in my pocket, but I can't buy a single loaf of bread." What I am about to tell you will explain all of your financial problems today. The Confederacy tried everything to stop the collapse. They passed laws requiring people to accept their currency. They threatened to imprison anyone who refused to accept their money. They even executed people for currency speculation. Sounds extreme? The U.S. government granted itself the exact same powers in 1933 when it declared gold ownership illegal. But here's the catch. Inflation in the Confederacy was no accident. It was planned. European banks, notably the Rothschilds and Barings, secretly bought Confederate bonds while simultaneously betting against them on the London markets. They knew the currency would collapse. They wanted it to collapse, because when it did, they could buy up Southern land and assets for pennies on the dollar. That's exactly what happened during Reconstruction. January 1864. A Confederate private earns $11 a month. A pound of bacon costs $10. Do the math. The soldiers were literally working to starve to death. But I haven't told you the worst part yet. The Confederate government knew their currency was dying, so they did what every failing government does. They printed more money. In 1864 alone, they printed $800 million. That's more than the entire money supply of the United States before the war. Prices doubled every 2 months. By Christmas 1864, inflation had reached 5,000%. Here is a real price list from Richmond, Virginia, December 1864. Butter, $25 per pound. Beef, $50 per pound. Hotel room, $100 per night. These are not misprints. These were real prices paid by real Americans. All the savings of a middle-class family were not enough to buy even a week's worth of food. The elite are hiding one thing from you. This same pattern has been repeated with every currency collapse in history. Confederate General Robert E. Lee wrote a secret letter to President Jefferson Davis that was kept secret for decades. Our soldiers are deserting not out of cowardice, but out of hunger. They receive letters from home telling them that their families are starving. What honor is there in fighting while your children are dying? This letter was classified until 1961. Why? Because it revealed the true reason for the South's defeat. But here's what should scare you. Today, America is in exactly the same financial situation. Since 2020, the Federal Reserve has increased the money supply by 40%. Inflation is eating away at the savings of the middle class. Food prices have doubled. Housing has become unaffordable. We are following the Confederacy's scenario step by step. Ready to hear something that will shock you? In 1864, the Confederate Congress passed a law that should scare every modern American. It prohibited prices from being quoted in any currency other than Confederate dollars. No prices in gold, no silver, no barter. Sound familiar? In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt signed Executive Order 6102, prohibiting Americans from owning gold. Same strategy, same control. By March 1865, inflation in the Confederacy had reached 9,000%. 9,000%. The Confederate dollar was worth less than a single Union penny. Soldiers burned money to keep warm because it was cheaper than buying firewood. One soldier wrote, "We are rich in money, but in reality we are starving." Here's what historians don't tell you. Mass desertion began not after military defeats, but after payday. When soldiers received their worthless pay, they simply went home. By April 1865, more than 100,000 Confederate soldiers had deserted. Not because of cowardice, because of the economy. Lee surrendered with only 28,000 hungry soldiers, while 100,000 simply went home to try to feed their families. The Union didn't win the Civil War. The printing press did. And now, in 2024, our government has turned that same printing press on full blast. But there's one important difference that changes everything. And now, a secret that will forever change the way you think about money. The financial collapse of the Confederacy was not a failure. It was a plan. Every fiat currency in history has followed the exact same pattern. Print, inflate, collapse. Rome did it, Weimar Germany did it, Zimbabwe did it, Venezuela did it, and now America is doing it. After the Civil War, a group of bankers from the North bought huge tracts of land in the South for pennies. They used real gold to buy assets from desperate Southerners who owned worthless Confederate paper. The largest transfer of wealth in American history did not occur during the war, but in the 2 years after it. The same families that own the Federal Reserve today made their fortunes by buying worthless Confederate paper. Here's what bankers will never tell you. They need inflation. They want currency collapse. Why? Because they own real assets, land, gold, businesses, and you own paper. When paper loses its value, they buy everything you have for pennies on the dollar. It's the oldest trick in banking, and it works every time. But there's one catch that few people know about. You can protect yourself by using the same strategy as the elite. During the collapse of the Confederacy, the few Southerners who survived financially did three things. They owned physical gold and silver. They owned productive land. They had assets that generated income regardless of currency. These are not complicated strategies. They are simple, but 97% of Americans do not use them. To date, the dollar has lost 96% of its value since the Federal Reserve was created in 1913. We are in the late stages of the same collapse that destroyed the Confederate dollar. The only difference? It's happening more slowly. But the end result will be the same. A massive transfer of wealth from people who own paper money to people who own real assets. And here's the last secret that the elite guard like the apple of their eye. The collapse is already programmed. The Fed knows exactly when and how the dollar will crash. They have run simulations. They have contingency plans. The central bank's digital currency is not a future possibility, but a planned replacement for the dollar after the collapse. While Americans argue about politics, the financial elite is quietly converting their dollars into hard assets. They are buying farmland, gold, bitcoins, and foreign real estate. They know what is coming because they are organizing it themselves. Just as European banks profited from the collapse of the Confederacy, today's elite will profit from the demise of the dollar. You have two options. You can hold on to your dollars and watch them turn into Confederate money, worthless paper that once meant something, or you can learn from history and protect yourself. Turn your paper into real assets. Buy physical gold and silver, acquire productive land, create multiple sources of income. The collapse will come, whether you are ready for it or not. If this video has opened your eyes to how the financial system really works, click like and subscribe to learn more about the hidden history. And in the comments, answer which financial secret struck you the most. I will personally respond to every comment. Remember, those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it.